All right, well, we probably should get started here. So I'm recording. I wonder if somebody can help remind me, because I'm about to share my screen, to stop sharing my screen so that it comes back to lecture in a little bit, because I don't want to mess up the recording again. But just to remind you guys, so we're recording these and putting them on Canvas. I just put another notice up on Canvas, and if you're not going to Canvas, I hope you will. By the way, they just put on the whole Canvas for everybody to see an announcement about the play that our sociology department is helping to put on at the end of the term, and there's an announcement about auditions, and I hope you'll consider coming out for that. But on Canvas, if you go there and go to our class, you'll see I have some announcements. One is a link to the YouTube videos, so if you ever miss a lecture, you want to review a lecture, you can go there and watch our lectures. You can also watch them live if you're stuck at home, sick, or for whatever reason. You can go, there's a link, another announcement on Canvas with a link to the Zoom link. So right now we're live on Zoom, and you could be watching this at home. All right, well, so what we've been talking about, just to get us back on track here, is we're talking about capitalism still, and what is capitalism, but we're talking really about the economic restructuring so what is, we've been presenting things in terms of questions. So what is economic restructuring? The larger question too is, what is globalization? Because as we ended up the other day, we saw that America has restructured its economy, and that was largely due to globalization. So what do we mean by restructuring? I just want to briefly put up that timeline again. It's an important timeline. 1945 is where I'm starting it, because that was the end of World War II. And it was a big shift in the American economy. As we mentioned, World War II restructured the economy. We went away from building things for consumers and towards building things for war. But when the war ended in 1945, had to restructure again to build an economy that worked for, for the future. And the argument I've been presenting to you is that America really radically changed its economy. And that there's two distinct periods. So I've said that 1985 is the kind of split off point. And we say that before that, we had a manufacturing economy, a manufacturing-based economy. And after that, we have a service-based economy. And as we tried to point out, a big difference between these two kinds of economies is this has a lot of what are called blue-collar middle-class jobs. And this economy doesn't have those. This economy has high-end service jobs and low-end service jobs. So that's the big restructuring. We went from being an economy where we made things. Manufacturing means factories making stuff, cars, refrigerators, all kinds of stuff America made. And we sold it all around the world. That's how you can get rich, is if you make a lot of things and sell them around the world. And America really was getting rich from 1945 till about 1985. I referred to that as the kind of golden age, the post-war economy. Well, I'll refer to it again as the golden age of capitalism. because capitalism really seemed to be working. We started this discussion by saying capitalism that was supposed to fall apart by working people coming together to overthrow it. Instead, what we saw was working people being treated very well by this new structure. What was this new structure? Well, good blue-collar middle-class jobs, meaning they were unionized jobs, meaning you're in the blue collar, meaning you're working with your hands, you're sweating all day, it's not easy work. But if you're part of a union, you have good pay, good benefits, good vacation time. And so working people were happy with these kinds of jobs. There was also Fordism, as we talked about, this idea that if you get paid well, you have money to spend and you can buy things with it. Things like your own home ownership was a common thing for these blue-collar, middle-class people. But in the service economy, if you're in one of these low-end service jobs, which is places like working at Walmart or working in fast food or working in any kind of sort of minimum wage work, you don't get good benefits and you don't get pay that allows you to really spend money on a lot of stuff you don't really need. And so it's in a lot of ways a return to the kind of capitalism that Marx was worried about, where working people are just being exploited every day, not getting to live full, good lives. We have declining union membership. We have a shrinking middle class on this side of the side. Over here, we had growing unions. We had a growing middle class. More and more people entering the middle class, going from poverty into the middle class. We had a strong social safety net on this side, meaning things, as we talked about, like unemployment insurance, welfare, social security. Later on, healthcare was added to that. If you're poor, you can get Medicaid. If you're too old, you can get Medicare. Now they have Obamacare, which was actually an adding to the safety net. That's one addition to it, has been healthcare. But here we have a shrinking social safety net. So all the things that were done to save capitalism, we started this by saying capitalism was supposed to fall apart, but somehow we saved it in America. And we saved it by doing all these things: growing middle class, building a social safety net, making sure people had the right to have unions. And then something began to change around the middle of the 1980s when Ronald Reagan was president. And now we don't have a lot of those things. And we have a smaller middle class, and we don't have unions, and we don't have a good social safety net. And the question is, for sociologists, why did we restructure the economy? Remember, structure is who has what. This is what people used to have in America, and now this is what they have. And if you ask, why is this relevant to you? Well, a big question is, who's going to win the presidency coming up? And Donald Trump is a Republican. Republicans did not build the New Deal. The Republicans were against the New Deal, against building a social safety net. They called that socialism and said, no, we can't do that. That'll be bad for America. Well, the Democrats proved them wrong by having a great America for the next 40 years. It's interesting to me that Trump is now saying he wants to make America great again, but he wants to do it by not doing the things that the Democrats did. But anyway, so a lot of working people are looking for somebody that's on their side, and a lot of people think Trump is. I think they're being fooled. I don't think billionaire guys that are greedy want to help regular working people. But Democrats haven't done a good job maybe of telling people why people should vote for them. But still, both sides are to blame if we ask which side, didn't want things to change. And they both did, Democrats and Republicans. So what changed? What was the thing that changed? It's globalization. That's what happened. And we need to understand what was globalization and what has it done to American families, American communities. I'm sure a lot of us, if you've grown up in this area, a lot of people talk about how things used to be better in Marysville and Yuba City than they are now. And that feeling is true across the United States. People feel like their small town used to be better and used to have more going on, and people used to feel better than they do now. And we see a lot of despair in America. Sociologists have called it deaths of despair, and maybe we should be looking at that idea more. when people don't have good jobs, when they don't have money to spend on things they really like, when they don't have a union to be part of, when their hometown is much worse than it used to be, it takes a toll on your health. What kinds of deaths of despair? Well, for example, like opiate overdoses. A lot of people in America are dying from, overdosing on drugs. And a lot of them are people, if you look at where this is happening, it's a lot of, lower middle class white people. People who used to have it better in America than they do now. We can ask, is it different for different races, but there's suicides and just addiction in general is kind of a slow suicide for a lot of people. And so some sociologists said, if you look around America, you see a lot of sort of deaths of despair, people just sort of dying out of just giving up hope on life. And I see that a lot around here. I mean, that's my big goal as a community college professor, is to try and give people hope and care that you can make things better. The world can get better. This town can get better. But if people are just, looking back at the past and going, well, things used to be better, now things are shitty, well, then they're just going to feel bad. But anyway, that's, and so, so we're trying to explain, so that's kind of getting ahead. We have this despair in America, and people wanting change and people wanting to go back to something better. But what happened? Well, what is globalization? Now, it depends who you ask. Trump says he's anti-globalization. And yet he's a guy that owns golf courses in England and places like that, and he's got all these connections in places like Dubai. And so when he says he's anti-globalization, I don't know if he's telling the truth about that. But and like I said, Democrats and Republicans both were on board with it. And when it first was proposed in America, like we're going to go into a more global economy, and people were talking about this in the 80s, there was a lot of excitement that this was going to make things even better in America, that if you have globalization, things are just going to get even better and better. And so both sides of our system were in favor of it. But what I'm saying is, depends who you ask. So if you ask a conflict theorist, which is what we're studying right now, is globalization good or bad? A lot of conflict theorists will say, well, it hasn't been good for working people. And so I'm giving you the conflict theories side of the story about globalization. Later in the class, we may look at, the business side. If you ask, rich businessmen like Elon Musk, is it good to have a global economy where things can be made all over the world? He might say, well, yeah, it's good. But if you ask a sociologist, has globalization been good so far? They would say, well, it's caused a lot of problems for people. What do we mean by globalization? From a conflict theory perspective, it comes down to mobility of capital. Capital is a complicated word in some ways, but we're using it to mean the class of people who invest, the capitalists. What is capital? Capital in and of itself is money that can be used to invest. If you have money in your pocket right now, it's probably not capital because you probably need that money. You probably need it for lunch or for your rent or for your clothing or something like that. But if you've got a bunch of money you don't need that you're never going to spend on something, that's capital because you can use it to go make more money with. Money that's being used to make money is capital. And what does it mean to say that capital is mobile now under globalization? Well, let's go back to our little timeline. So capital first started to get mobile right around 1985, right around the middle of the 1980s. To say it's mobile is to say capitalists are not stuck in their own country when they want to invest, when they're thinking, where can I make money with my money? In the previous economy, it used to be if you were an American capitalist, you pretty much had to look at America as the place you would invest your money to try and make money. You couldn't really go invest in Mexico or England or China. You had to invest in your own country because that was your nationality. That's where you could invest your money. But in the 1980s, the capitalist world began to say, let's kind of lower these borders. Why do we have borders for capital? Capital needs to go where capital wants to go. So why do we have borders for capital? We need to allow it to be more mobile. And how do you do that? You basically do it with what are called free trade agreements. Remember, capitalists have always wanted free trade. That was why they started capitalism and overthrew the monarchies back in the day, was because capitalists want to be able to move their products wherever they want to go and sell them to whoever they want. And in the 1980s, American working people were making good money. As I mentioned, if you were working at General Motors in 1985, you were making about $85,000 a year in today's dollars. You had 4 weeks vacation. You had full medical and dental benefits. So you were a well-treated worker. Was General Motors not making profit because of that? No, they were still making about 20% rate of return, it's called. If you're getting about 20% of your investment back each year, you're doing well. So General Motors was doing well, and the workers were doing well. But the investors, Wall Street, the people who their only connection to General Motors is that they own stock in General Motors, the Wall Street people began to say, well, we could actually increase our stock value if you paid workers less. If you could find some workers that didn't get $85,000 a year, and benefits and all that, we the stock owners could make a lot more money off this stock. So how do we do that? Well, they first started these free trade zones. And the first free trade zones were on the border of the United States and Mexico. It was called the Maquiladora region. Maquiladoras are factories. And they put these factories right on the border. So this border was just like a 1-mile strip of land. You could see Texas on that side, and you could see Mexico on that side. And they built these factories there. And they said, well, if you're Mexican, you can work in these factories. And the pay is like $1 an hour. And so it's the same cars that they made up in Detroit, Michigan, where workers are getting paid $85,000 a year. They moved those factories to the border of Mexico and paid Mexican workers $1 an hour to build them. You could see how much more profit you're going to make when you're paying Mexican workers $1 an hour than when you're paying American workers $85,000. And it worked out so well, these maquiladoras were so profitable, they said, well, why don't we expand the free trade zone? Why just a mile along the border? Why not all of Mexico be part of our free trade zone? So the first big free trade agreement we're mostly aware of is called NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Trump talks a lot about NAFTA. A lot of people talk a lot about NAFTA. NAFTA at first was presented as this great opportunity for Mexico and for the United States and for Canada. So what the agreement says, it's between Canada, USA, and Mexico. And it basically says, as far as capital goes, we're all one country. We're not 3 separate countries. If you're a capitalist, we're all one country. So what does that mean? Well, it means, for example, if you own trucks in Mexico, if you own a trucking company in Mexico, you don't have to stop at the border and move your stuff off your Mexican trucks onto American trucks. You can just drive your Mexican truck from Mexico up through the United States, all the way up through Canada. And if you're an American investor and you want to open a factory, you don't have to open a factory in Texas. You can open a factory in Michoacan or someplace. And if you are a Mexican investor, you don't have to just open a factory in Sinaloa. You can go up to Canada. So if you're an investor, if you're a person with capital, and you want to put your capital somewhere to make as much money as possible, NAFTA is a great thing. No more borders. I can just go where I think is best. But if you're labor, if you're a worker, are you free to go under NAFTA across the border wherever you want to go to make the most money? No. If you're a capitalist, the free trade agreement says you're free, you're mobile. You're a worker, sorry, senor, you stay there on that side of the border where the pay is $1 an hour. And you American worker, you stay on this side of the border where you don't have any more jobs because we send them where the dollar an hour is. So working people are told, you're not mobile, you're still American, you stay in America, you're still Mexican, you stay in Mexico. But we capitalists, we're borderless. We can go wherever we want. And so that's why conflict theorists say this is it's an undoing of the deal. We said that 1945 kind of started with this New Deal between capital and labor, saying, hey, capital, we will not strike and not fight against you if you treat us well, and if we all are working together for good capitalism. But when these companies start saying, well, we're going to move out of the United States and move somewhere else, it's like they're saying we're out of the deal. We're not in the deal anymore. Go make a new deal with Mexican workers, with Chinese workers too. So not just the NAFTA, but eventually the free trade area of the Americas is meant to encompass all of North America, all of Central America, all of South America, so that as far as capitalism goes, they're all one place. Now workers are still not in one place. They'll be told, no, you're Ecuadorian, you stay there. You're Costa Rican, you stay there. You're white American, you stay there. So it's not an equal, hey, the workers didn't get to make a new deal. They're still stuck in their country, hoping their government will protect them. And so, so why this is a problem, if you have mobile capital, but not mobile labor. And by the way, here's where I say why I don't think Trump is really on the side of the workers. He says we should be building more walls and keeping more people on the side of the borders. He's not saying let's let workers go back and forth. If you let workers go back and forth, that would be more fair. And if you were, you wouldn't have to leave Mexico to get good wages here. And if you could bring your wages back to Mexico, that would, I mean, and so anyway, what it leads to is called a race to the bottom. This is what conflict theorists say about free trade agreements. If you allow capital to be mobile, but you don't allow labor to be mobile, so we have to start here with the idea that labor is not mobile. Under these free trade agreements, you're still being told, well, you're a certain nationality, you're a citizen of a certain country, so you have to stay there. And a lot of conflict theorists would say, well, it would be a more fair trade agreement if you allowed labor to move. Like if I was a white person, if I'm an American person, I keep saying white, I don't mean white, I mean American. And I think it's better to move to Mexico. Like there's a lot of us might want to sell our house here and buy a house down there, and you could live pretty well down there, then better than you could up here. But that's not very easy to do under these new free trade agreements. You're told, well, you're not a citizen of Mexico, so you can't just come down here. And so, and if you were a Mexican worker and you could go work up there, that would be better for you. But that's not how it is. You're still being told now that there are borders if you're a person. But if you're a capitalist and you have capital to send across the border, no, there aren't borders. And so what does that mean for who's racing whom to the bottom? Well, it means nowadays that countries compete for capital. In the pre-globalization days, countries tried to protect their own capitalists. They tried to say, we don't want, for example, American people buying Chinese or Japanese cars. We want American people buying American cars. So how, in the old days, how did you try to make sure Americans bought American cars and not buy Japanese cars? It was done through what are called tariffs. They would say, okay, Japan, if you want to sell your cars here, we're gonna put a tax on them, an extra amount of money. That way they'll be expensive. And compared to the American car will be cheaper because that's not gonna have a tariff on it. And so if I'm the American consumer deciding which car to buy, hopefully I'll pick the American car because it's cheaper. And if I do pick the Japanese car, at least the people of America will get a nice chunk of change because there's that tariff on top of it. And by the way, that was something Trump has tried to do, was bring tariffs back. So he was trying to go away from free trade, I guess. But tariffs well, we won't get into that whole question, but that used to be the old idea was you protect, it's called protectionism. We'll protect our own products against other companies' products. So they might want to sell them here, but we're going to put duties and taxes and tariffs on them. That's why they used to have these shops at airports called a duty-free shop. So at the airport, you could buy the thing cheaper than you could once you were really in country and spending the real, having to pay the tariffs and stuff and the duties. Anyway, I don't want to bore you, but the point being is that countries now are not protecting their own products and their own things. And so that means that countries themselves have to try and get this mobile capital to come to them. We want Nike to invest here in Ecuador. Nike, don't build a factory in Mexico. Adidas, don't build a factory in Mexico. Bring your factory down to Ecuador. We'll be much better for you, Adidas, than Mexico will be. And then Peru says, well, don't go to Ecuador, come down to Peru. Peru is much better than Ecuador. What are countries doing if you're competing for capital? And I like to think of what we're talking about here are global corporations. Corporations used to be like Adidas, like Nike. Well, Adidas was always a French company, I think. Nike used to be an American company. Apple used to be an American company. General Motors used to be an American company. These companies are corporations. But these corporations now, it's not accurate to call them by a particular nation, American or Japanese. They're global now. They operate all over the planet. If you are Nike, you have factories all over the world. If you are Ford, Toyota has factories here in the United States. In fact, if we ask, is a Ford an American car or is a Toyota an American car? A lot of Toyotas are made more in America than the Fords are. So you think you're buying an American car when really it was built somewhere else and you're buying a Toyota thinking it was a Japanese car, but really it was all built in America by Americans. We have, in other words, a global assembly line now. So that your car is made all over the country, all over the world, really. You may have the body made in one country, the electronics made in another country, the engine made in a different country. If you're trying to visualize capitalism now, it isn't just one factory in a city like England, Manchester, England. It's now a company that's striding the whole planet, and it's got factories here and factories there, and it's got consumers there and consumers there. It's selling to Japanese, to Americans, to Ecuadorians. It's a global corporation. And I think of these global corporations as like little spaceships, little UFOs. They're circling the planet looking for the best place to plop down for a while and make money. And these countries, all the countries of Earth, are trying to get these spaceships to come land in my country. Come land here, because if you land here, you'll employ my people and we'll be making money. But if you go land over there in Ecuador, then we won't be getting that. So countries are trying to get these spaceships to land in their country. But how do you do that? So that I'm finally getting around to you. If they're competing, what can they offer? We're talking about this competition, and it's a race to the bottom. We're racing each other to go lower than the other. Ecuador wants to go lower than Peru. Costa Rica wants to go lower than that. Lower in terms of what? So we're talking about this competition, this race to the bottom. What do you think, what are they offering? If you're a country, if you're Ecuador, and you're saying to the spaceship, the Nike spaceship, don't put your Nike factory up there in Costa Rica, come down here to Ecuador. What can you say to Nike if you're the president of Ecuador that will get Nike to put their factory in your country, not in their country?
Maybe like they'll charge them less to be there, or like take less of the profit?
Yeah, well, so thinking about conflict theory and how profit is made, we talked about surplus value. How do you get surplus value, and what could you offer to a company to let them know your profits are going to be higher here? What would it require to have high profits? What could you offer? Remember, what makes for surplus value? How do you get that?
Overproduction?
No, overproduction can happen when you're not paying, when workers are being really productive. But what was the thing we were trying to do? When I was Flax Share Company, I was trying to make profit. What's the main way I can make profit? What creates value? Remember, we talked about a certain theory of value that conflict theorists have. So if we're gonna get value as a company, what is it that I'm looking for in your country that's gonna make value for me? What is the source of all value according to conflict theorists? Remember I asked you to take $100 and go buy wood and you came back with $110? How are you able to increase value of your $100?
Was it the labor?
Their labor. So if I'm looking for a way to make profit in Ecuador, what am I looking to not spend money on or to have cheap? Labor. Yeah, it's pretty basic. You're looking for people that will work for less than other people. So if you're Ecuador, you're saying to them, well, their minimum wage is $1 an hour, we'll do it for 80 cents an hour. Oh, they do it for 80 cents an hour, we'll do it for 40 cents an hour. So cheap labor is one of the main things that you would be able to offer in this race to the bottom. Cheaper labor. What else could you offer? What else, if you're a company looking to do business in a place, and maybe you've never thought like a business capitalist, and good for you if you haven't, but what are they looking for? So cheap labor, what other things do companies not like to spend money on? And we've mentioned them before a little bit in here. If you're a capitalist, you don't like government. Why don't you like government? What are some of the things government does to capitalists that they don't like? When they say they want free trade, what do they not want? What would be the opposite of free trade? Taxes. So yeah, regulated trade. We said the two big things capitalists have always hated are taxes. They don't want to pay taxes to government, and they don't want government telling them what to do. They don't want regulation. And so yeah, no or low taxes. If you come to Ecuador, and this is what a lot of these countries say, they say we won't charge you any taxes. You can make all the profit you want. All we want is that you employ people. If you give people jobs and you pay them money to do the jobs, then we will tax them as the government of Ecuador will tax our own people on their income. But we're not going to tax you, Nike, for the money you make. You can just make it and go. And that's a nice deal if you're a capitalist. Oh yeah, I don't have to worry about taxes. Thank you, I'll do that. Also, no or few regulations. What kind of regulations? We said American workers with their unions have gotten some power, and one thing unions can do is make sure that workers are treated well, not only in terms of pay, but what other things might companies do that might harm a worker that regulation is meant to protect against?
Like the hour limit, how much they can work?
Well, yeah, so that relates, by the way, to the cost of labor, but yeah, so, yeah, labor regulations. Like, for example, they may say no unions. Some countries say we don't allow unions. So you don't have to worry, senor, about unions down here because they're not gonna happen. And they may even say, you know, the guy that tried to start some unions down here, yeah, we don't know what happened to him. He disappeared. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean to be racist about it, but I'm saying some of these countries down there are not democracies. They're brutal dictatorships. And so they can say to these companies, trust me, sir, when you come down here and you build your factory, there's not going to be any union activity happening. And if there is, you know, we have ways of taking care of those guys. So it's a lot like things were in America before we legalized unions. When guys tried to start unions in America, they'd get killed, they'd get beaten up, they'd get brutalized. And so it's going back to an older, more brutal form of capitalism in terms of how workers are treated. So no labor regulations, no safety and health regulations. So that's a big thing. American workers have fought for better treatment on the job so that you don't get injured, so that you're not breathing bad chemicals, so that you're not getting cancer while you're working there. How do we have those freedoms here in America? Well, it's really power that workers have, and we have it through things like the Occupational and Safety and Health Administration. We have a government agency that working people have demanded and fought for to say, hey, we don't want to get mistreated on our jobs. We want to know when we go to work that we're not going to die. But in a lot of poorer countries where they don't have democracy, working people have not had the power to demand things like occupational safety and health. So again, American working people have fought long and hard for things like shorter hours, 8-hour day, weekends, free, safety, things like that. Another one is environmental. A big one is environmental regulations. And Americans, again, we have democracy. We passed in America the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. So we tell our own companies in this country, you can't just dump chemicals in the water, bro. You gotta be nice to our rivers and lakes. You can't just be pumping stuff into the air, bro. You gotta put filters on your smokestacks and things like that. But in these other countries where they don't have democracy and working people haven't been able to demand things like a Clean Air Act and a Clean Water Act, well then there aren't any laws against it. So the Ecuador might just say, well, come down here, senor. We won't know what you're burying in the dirt behind your factory. We won't know what your factory is putting into the streams and lakes because we don't have a government agency that monitors those things, that tests those things. So you hear lots of American companies, including Trump, oh, the government just wants to tell me what to do about the environment. And well, that's why we have much cleaner air now in California than we used to. We used to have really bad smog in California and really high throat cancer rates and lung cancer rates from all the smog. And when California passed even stricter air standards, and that's why we have somewhat fresher air than we used to. And if you ask me, if we don't do more about global warming, we're going to be seeing more of this crazy extreme weather and extreme temperatures and a lot of other problems. So regulating business, telling business, hey, making money isn't the only important thing in the world. There's other things we care about, like clean water, like clean air, like kids being treated well, like parents being able to come home after a day's work and take care of their kids. We care about those things. But in these other countries, the workers haven't been able to demand that kind of treatment. So basically, another thing is less democracy. One of the favorite places for companies to go nowadays is China. And China calls itself a communist country, even though they're the place where all the capitalists want to go now. And one reason the capitalists want to go there is because they have a very strong, powerful government that isn't democratic, that can tell people what to do. And if you're a business trying to make money, you don't want democracy. Democracy's messy. Democracy, we don't know what the people might decide. The people might decide tomorrow that they do want unions or that they do want Clean Air Act or something like that. So we don't want democracy. We want to just deal with one guy who's in charge, and that one guy we can make a deal with. If you're a business trying to make a deal, you want one guy you've got to deal with and that okay, my profits are going to be this high in 20 years because you're guaranteeing no unions, you're guaranteeing no regulations. But if it's a democracy, the guy can't guarantee that stuff. Well, I don't know. The election next year, maybe this guy will get elected and it'll all change. So we don't know. So if I'm a business, I don't like democracy. I like dictatorships. I like places where the guy's in charge and he can tell me for sure how things are going to be going forward. And so businesses don't like democracy. And we as regular people, we like to, I think, have some say over the decisions that are made in our lives, like whether they're going to dump stuff in our water or not, or in our air. And democracy is a way for regular people to have some say over decision making. But dictatorships, no, you have no say. Somebody just tells you one day this is how it's going to be, and you deal with it. So conflict theorists are trying to tell American people this globalization thing is not, it's going against everything that made America great from 1945 to 1985. And so, so that's what globalization is. I mentioned the free trade agreements. I didn't mention the Pan-Pacific Partnership, but that's why China is another place. Some of these agreements are with Asian countries too, and Japan and China, and so they allow American companies to invest in these other places. And so conflict theorists say globalization could be a good thing for all people if it was balanced by democracy and mobility for working people. if you could move where you want to move and go where the best opportunities are for you as a working person, and there was a chance to do that, like you say, hey, Mexico isn't nothing, no future for me here, I'm gonna go somewhere else. Or if you could actually stay in Mexico because, working people there would also be paid $15 an hour instead of being paid so much less than they are here. Maybe that'd be better for working people. But the way it is now, all the power, all the freedom is in the hands of the capitalists, and all the mobility and freedom working people are not getting. But that's what's happening around the world, is a lot of production is moving to places like China and South America and other places like that. And America is experiencing deindustrialization. So the flip side of it is the restructuring of the American economy and deindustrialization, or the loss of manufacturing, the shift from manufacturing to service. And as America has lost its industrial base, when I say industry, we mean factories, a lot of towns have lost their sort of identity. So a lot of towns across America used to be what we call factory towns. They served a particular industry, and they had several factories of that industry usually, or related industries. And lots of people in those towns would be employed in those industries, and the town would thrive based on the prosperity of that industry and those factories. But because of globalization, a lot of those factories have closed. And so what we have across America is the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is the area of America that used to be the former industrial heartland. So places like Ohio, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania. It's the Northeast, the industrial Northeast of America is now called the Rust Belt because those factories aren't producing anything and they've all sitting there rusting. If you go drive through Dayton, Ohio, or Detroit is a perfect example. Detroit was the capital of the car industry of the whole planet, and at one time was a booming, sparkling city, powerful place. Now it's like a ghost town, or for a while there, you could buy like a whole skyscraper in Detroit for like a couple $1,000 or something like that, because it was like a ghost town. It's coming back a little bit now, Detroit, but like it's not what it once was. And like the Detroit Pistons, I follow basketball, they're like the worst team in the league, and the place is a place of misery and despair rather than a place of hope and American power and prosperity. And so just trying to understand how American people, how our own communities have changed as a result of these decisions that were made, that most of us, if we had been asked, do you want to let your jobs go to other countries so capitalists can make a lot more money? I'm not sure people would have agreed, but we were sold this idea, being told this new economy is going to be a lot better. In other words, people were told, yeah, we are going to go to a different economy, but it's going to be a digital economy, it's going to be a high-tech economy, and yeah, you won't be working in a car factory anymore, but you'll be working at like an iPhone factory or something, and you'll be making way more and doing way better than your parents and grandparents were. And that's the promise that hasn't happened. And both the Democrats and Republicans were in favor of NAFTA when it was signed originally. And they saw it as this big victory that we're going into the future of a better world where, that's a fully capitalist world. And we don't need to worry about communism anymore because everybody's on board with this shift towards a high-tech capitalist future. But what has it done to America? So that's the focus of us as sociologists. What has it done to American communities and American people? And I hate the high-tech economy myself. Like having to log into your computer before you can teach anything. So I was going to share some content. And by the way, here's this announcement about Salt of the Earth audition. So I hope you'll consider doing that and telling your friends about it. But this is what I want to show you. So what is this showing? So first of all, let's pay attention to the time period. It starts around 1945, where I started my timeline. It goes up into roughly the present. It's showing the different classes of America. So economists sometimes divide America into 5 different classes, what are called 20th percentiles or different percentiles. But basically, it's just showing the bottom 20% of America, the median group of people, the middle class. So it's basically the poor people, the middle class people, and the rich people. So red is rich, this beigeish color, teal, whatever you call it, is the median people, and the blue are the poorer people. And you see, starting around 1945, everybody was doing better in America. What it's showing is their income going up. Everybody's was going up. And it was going up together. We were all doing better. Yeah, rich people were making more than poor people. That's what makes them rich and poor. But if poor people are doing better than they used to, which they were, then it feels like things are getting better, and they were. More and more people joining the middle class, more and more people having homes, more and more people sending their kids to college. Then we see right around the mid-80s, things split apart. And the rich people start doing way better than they've ever done in America before. This top 95th percentile means only 5% of people, the top 5%. We're not in that group here. I'm not in that group. I think by my income, they say I'm in the top 10%, but anyway, I'm not trying to brag, but I'm trying to give you a sense of who we're talking about. We're talking about people that make like well over 500,000 a year or something like that. They're the people that are doing much better than they've ever done before. The middle class group, you can see they haven't really got much better off than they were in the 1980s. And same with the poorer people. They're basically even with where they were. So everybody, the rich people did much better as a result of globalization. In other words, as they were able to invest money in other places, paying other people to do well, they made a lot of profit. Stock market took off. People owning stock and owning things, these are capitalists, basically. They're making a lot more money after 1985, and working people, the working middle class, the managers and professionals, the low-end service people, they're not doing better. And so that's, if we ask, when we hear Trump and people saying, we want to go back to when America was great, a lot of them mean like the 50s, 60s, 70s, when America clearly was getting better and better each year, things were rising, things were getting better. And then this split happens, this division of America into very clear class groups. Back when I was growing up, people used to say, there's no classes in America, we're all just Americans, doing well. But nowadays, it's pretty clear that there's big divisions between those who have a lot and the rest of us who don't. And a lot of the people that have a lot, they segregate themselves into special communities for the wealthiest. They have gated communities, they have special enclaves, rich enclaves that are more and more exclusive and you can't get into. And the rest of us are dealing with crumbling neighborhoods, crumbling infrastructure, things like that. So I'm overstating the problem maybe a little bit, but I'm trying to give you the sense of how conflict theorist looks at this. That this is really just a return to how capitalism was at the beginning, where the capitalists get to make all the money and get as rich as possible, and working people are basically just exploited and left behind. And so the danger there, if you're a conflict theorist, is to say, well, will the working people just keep on taking this, or are they gonna join together and demand something better? There has been signs of a new labor movement. In other words, working people realizing unions are the thing that are going to help you get back what you used to have. And we see increased labor activity in the United Auto Workers, at Starbucks, UPS, even Amazon was trying to unionize. But in these, more global times, when working people are spread across different countries, it's harder for them to unionize. And I personally think that's an issue that hasn't gotten enough attention, is that nowadays, if working people are going to have solidarity and join together, they have to do what Mark said and join together across national boundaries. In other words, American working unions might have to have solidarity and connections with Mexican working unions and say, no, the minimum wage is 15. But if they're not locking hands together and demanding things together, then it's easy for capitalists to just divide workers against each other. Hey, these ones over here this, and these ones over there that. So anyway, that's again, maybe not the most vivid way to show you. A better way to show you what's happened is to look at people themselves and their communities. And the best way I know to do that is with the video that I'm going to have us all watch. I don't know if I should, maybe we will start the video today, but I want to talk a little bit about this video. So the video is called Two American Families. And I will give you this link. So what I'm going to have you do is watch this video, mostly on your own time, because Will can watch some of it today. But you're going to have to finish it on your own time, because next Tuesday, we're going to review for the exam. And next Thursday, I'm going to start the exam. You're going to have a week long to take it, and you're going to do it through Canvas. But one of the last question on the exam is going to be about this video. And so you do need to watch it and think about it and analyze it using ideas from this class. It's called Two American Families. And I think it's a very unique video in a lot of ways. I haven't been able to find something to replace it because it's so unique. I have been showing it for a long time in my sociology classes. It started in 1991, so it's two families in Milwaukee. Milwaukee, Wisconsin is part of that industrial heartland I was talking about, that place we can now call the Rust Belt. Wisconsin is near Michigan, and Michigan is where Detroit is and all the car industry, but Wisconsin had a lot of industry as well. Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin. And these two families, one are the black family, are the Stanleys. And the white family is the Newmans. They're both from Milwaukee. They're roughly the same age, the parents of both families. They're different races, which is interesting to consider. But other than that, they're very similar in that they're working class families who used to be employed in unions. So they start out in 1991 at Briggs and Stratton. Is a factory. So in 1991, they were blue-collar, middle-class people. They worked in a factory. Briggs and Stratton make small motors. Both families were employed by the factory. Only the dad had to work. A big thing about blue-collar, middle-class jobs is they paid enough so that if all you had was like a high school education, your wife could stay home and be a stay-at-home mom, and the dad could go off to work and make enough money to support the family. And a big change that we're describing here in the restructuring of the American economy is that these low-end service jobs don't pay enough to really support a family. So today's families, both parents have to work in almost all cases. And so that's a big change in terms of gender, as we'll see. But in terms of race, anyway, so they were blue-collar, middle-class. But Briggs and Stratton is one of those factories that decided to move its operations across borders and go to someplace else. And so they lost their jobs, not because they did anything wrong, not because the company failed, but because the company was doing well, really. And so they have to then try to make it in the service industry. And this movie follows them all the way to 2013. That's what makes it a unique movie. It's very rare to find documentaries that follow the same group of people over a long period of time. It's what we can call, in sociology, we're going to learn about research, but ethnography is when you study people up close over time. So like, there's different ways to study society, as we'll learn later. But if you're a sociologist, one approach is called ethnography, and that's where you go and live with a group of people basically for a long period of time. So you really get to understand them, how they see the world, but also how their lives change over time. It's a lot different from, say, a survey. That's another way sociologists study things. We just give people a questionnaire and ask them to answer a question right now. But if you just give people a survey, you're just getting a snapshot. Like, that's how they feel right now. If I ask you, like, right now, who do you want to vote for president? You go, Trump. But then in like 3 months, I ask you, and you're like, nah, I heard some of the things he said, and I don't like him anymore. I don't think I'm going to vote at all, or something. In other words, you change over time. But questionnaires don't really capture that. They just capture how you're feeling right now. But an ethnography can really capture what people are experiencing over a long period of time and how they change. And so that's what's really interesting about this video is you see the changes in these families over time as the children grow, as the women experience work and different kinds of work, as people experience new relationships, their lives change. And America's changing all around them. You'll see that they experience the service economy. They're trying to struggle to make it in the service economy. So they used to have these good blue-collar, middle-class jobs, but now, as you'll see, what's only really available are low-end service jobs that don't pay anywhere near what they used to get and don't have benefits like they used to have and don't allow them to have the American dream. A big idea of the American dream is owning your own home. And both families are really keen to own their own home. And you can pay attention to what happens with that. So the different things I want you to pay attention as you watch it. One is well, what are the social problems that in the community? So one of the things we're asking you to do as sociologists in this class is not just look at people's problems as private troubles, just themselves. But when lots of people are experiencing the same thing, then it's more of a public issue than a private trouble. And so we're looking at two private families in this movie, but your job as a sociologist is to try and observe how it isn't just them that this video is about. It's about larger social problems that are going on in their community, Milwaukee, but I'm sure you'll see connections to your own community. I mean, Yuba Sutter is not that different from Milwaukee and has experienced a lot of the same transitions. I'm sure that during the manufacturing economy of the 70s, 60s, and 70s, this area was doing better than it's doing now. And so what are the problems you see? You know, things like the neighborhood. How is the neighborhood affected? How are families affected? Like, are families getting along worse or better? What about schools? So these are things you can keep in mind. Things like families, schools, neighborhoods, relationships. How are these all affected by this larger structural change? In other words, another way to look at this is a big restructuring in the American economy, changing who has what. A lot of people used to have good middle-class jobs that paid well. Now they don't. They have less, they have different. So how is this changing in what people have or don't have? How is that change affecting the culture? In other words, how they think and feel about themselves, about each other, about the country. It affects how you think and feel the structure, and they're related to each other. But and so a big idea I do want to make sure we can pay attention to as well, and it's one I haven't really covered yet, and it's one we're going to cover in much more detail later. But it's so important for this video and for the play that I'm hoping you'll get involved with. It's the question of gender. What is gender? I'm gonna ask you, and I don't think I think sociology has a different answer to that question than people have in their everyday conversations. And I personally wish that more people knew about the sociological way of thinking about this topic than they do. But so what is gender? What is a good working pen? Why are the people of California deprived of good pens? So gender, what are we talking about? We're going to say more about this idea later in the class, but sex and gender are two different things in sociology. And I think people are confused about this for some reason in our society, but sex is whether you're male or female. And you really don't have much choice in that. I know a lot of people think you get to choose your sex, but your sex is chosen by biology or by God. And even if you're born with both penis and vagina, in these days they assign you a certain sex at birth. And even though nowadays you can get a sex change operation, you can only do it once. I mean, I've never heard of people going back and forth. So basically you're male or female, either or. It's an either or kind of thing. It's fixed. And gender, on the other hand, is the question of masculinity and femininity. And that's a different thing than sex. And this is why I think people get confused, because in our language we use the terms the same. We say, what's your gender? I'm male, I'm female. That's not what gender is in sociology. Gender is masculinity and femininity. It has nothing to do with male or female. I mean, it has something to do with it. But what's the difference between saying you're masculine, or this behavior is masculine or feminine, versus saying you're male or female? Well, male or female is biological. Like I said, you don't have much choice over the matter. It's fixed. In other words, you're either one or the other. Gender, though, is not biological. Gender is cultural and social. Cultural and social. Meaning, what? It's not determined by God or by biology. It's determined by cultures and societies. So, for example, is short hair masculine or feminine? Is long hair masculine or feminine? In our culture, we'd say long hair is feminine, I guess, but would you tell a Native American warrior that his long hair was girly? Would you tell a Sikh male that his long hair was girly? I mean, what if you consider long hair girly? It depends what culture you're in, what society you're in. In other words, and same with a lot of things that what's feminine or not. High heels, by the way, we think they're so feminine to wear high heels. High heels started as a masculine thing. As men who wanted to be able to ride horses and shoot guns at the same time, you needed these special heels that allowed you to stand up in your stirrups. And so guys that had high heel boots for the first time, they thought it was the most toughest thing ever. Would walk around town in their high heel boots. And then at some point it got defined more as a feminine thing. So now men won't be seen in their high heels. And anyway, so what's masculine or feminine? It changes all the time. It's variable. It changes from culture to culture. There's cultural variability, which I was just describing. In Native American culture, long hair in a man is masculine. In American U.S. Marine culture, high and tight short hair is masculine. Depends which culture you're in. So it varies by culture. There's also historical variability. So over time in a particular culture, the culture may change its ideas about what's masculine or feminine. Like I just said, high heels used to be masculine, now they're feminine. Blue jeans, are blue jeans masculine or feminine? They used to be only for gold miners. Now a lot of women wear them and think they're very sexy. Well, which one is it? Is it a working clothes for gold miners, or is it something you wear to the club to look hot? It depends. It depends what time period you're in. And what about individual variability? you know, what one person's masculinity might be, I mean, you might change. I'm very masculine when I'm with my wife, I hope sometimes. When I'm with my two daughters and playing dolls with them when they're little girls, I wasn't being very masculine. When I go dancing with my wife, is that masculine or feminine? A lot of guys don't want to dance. It's not manly, but she likes it, so we enjoy it. You know, what is, I'm talking about like ballroom dancing. What about, you know, so what's masculine or feminine? I mean, in a person, you can change all day long. You could be very feminine in the morning, very masculine in the afternoon, go back to being feminine later on. We change all the time. We're variable in how masculine or feminine we are. And we don't decide what's masculine or feminine, our culture does. So you might just think I'm just being me, but my culture keeps saying I'm so gay and so girly, but you were just being you. Or my culture says I'm so manly and everything, but I'm just being me. So gender is a very different thing than sex. And what I want you to pay attention to this movie is, what about masculinity and femininity? How do the people in the movie express themselves in terms of gender? Are there any changes in the people? For example, as women go from being quote unquote stay-at-home moms, taking care of children and the home, but then they're in the position of having to work in the economy, how does their sense of femininity and how they present themselves to the world, like their clothing choices and their voice, how they, like even their tone of voice. If you're a very girly girl, you might talk in a high voice and be very quiet. And if you're more of a masculine lady, you know, a tough, broad, tough lady, you might talk in a deeper voice. And you, the same person could be either one. If she's a stay-at-home mom, she's being very girly and girly girl. And if she's, no, I'm a security guard working for a bank, I'm gonna be a little tougher now, carrying my gun. So masculinity and femininity are changeable things, and I don't know why, you know, a lot of Americans want to say, oh, what's my pronoun and all that stuff, and I get irritated with it because sociology has always said it's always variable. You know, you could be a he now, a she then. I mean, depend, and we're all variable. And in other words, masculine and feminine is a continuum. You can be very, very masculine or very, very feminine, and you can be anywhere in between. There's a million places in between the masculine and femininity continuum. But male and female is binary. So it's a binary. You're either one or the other. Whereas this is a continuum or a spectrum. And you can go back and forth on the spectrum during the day, during your life. I used to wear dreadlocks when I was in college, and part of the reason I wanted to is I didn't like these binary things, like binary race. Are you white or black? Well, I'm both. Are you male or female? Well, I'm both. Or are you masculine or feminine? And so, but nowadays, I have two sons, and they really want to make sure their dad is a tough guy. So, I started lifting weights again and stuff like that. And they're like, Dad, yeah, that's cool, man. And so, like, now being masculine is something I want to be doing. But we change, don't we? How masculine we are, how feminine we are, and we all do it. And we've always been doing it. We've all always been variable in our gender. So I just wish more people talked about it this way because, yeah, you can't really change your sex that easy. You can only do it through science and stuff like that. And, people can argue about whether if you've changed your sex, you should be allowed to do some of the things that other people who didn't change their sex get to do. I mean, there's big arguments about things like sports and stuff like that and transsexuality, but I'm not even talking about that. We've all been transgender our whole lives in the sense that we've all been able to change how masculine or feminine we want to be. And I think it's very interesting to see, again, how structure, as people's what they have or don't have, their job or not, or what kind of job or not, how that affects how they think and feel about their gender, their culture, the cultural side of things. So anyway, and you can think of this term also, I think, in terms of structure and culture. The structure of our bodies is our sex. You either have or don't have a penis or a vagina. But what those things mean, how we think and feel about people's penises and vaginas, and how we present ourselves and how we behave and how we think, those are gender and those are socially constructed. The fact that they're variable shows you that it's socially constructed, that as societies change and evolve, they change their ideas about gender and sexuality and stuff like that. Penises haven't changed. Penises are the same 10,000 years later than they were 10,000 years ago. But our notions of masculinity and femininity have changed many times over that period. So, so it's not that I think we could avoid a lot of arguments if we got back to thinking of it this way. But anyway, as you watch the video, I'm asking you to pay attention to gender. And so that was one question, or what were the social problems in the community? That's one, and gender is a question there. So like one issue is, how do men, I mean, I've been focusing on how women may change their sense of themselves as they go from being stay-at-home moms to being full-time workers. What about men who go from being factory workers, making good money, taking care of their family, paying the bills, to being guys that now make $9 an hour working at Walmart saying, you know, can I help you? Can I help you? In other words, being a service person is a very different thing from being a manufacturing person. And manufacturing is much more defined as a masculine thing. And a lot of men in America have been told, you don't get to do the masculine work anymore. You've got to do this feminine work of serving people in a retail establishment or a food service. And a lot of American men are not really down with that. They're like, well, my sense of my masculinity is not, hey, can I help you with that? It's, you know. And so, so instead of working, they go stay home, or they go take Oxycontin, or they go overdose it. In other words, there could be, in some case, is there any sign of a masculinity crisis? I want you to pay attention to femininity and masculinity. I think you'll see the women seem to handle, well, the second question is differences in the families and their reactions, or their experience. So both families experienced very similar structural change. They lost their good blue-collar middle-class jobs, and they had to try and make it in the service economy. But now I'm asking you, can you compare the two families? That's a big part of doing sociology, is comparing like different racial groups, different religious groups, different gender groups. So what comparisons can you make about these two families and how they experience this structural change? All right, well, let me just tell you, it's called Two American Families. You can find it on YouTube or on PBS. I'm going to post a link to it. So look on Canvas. If you haven't been going to Canvas, by the way, please go to Canvas. I know this isn't an online class, but as I've tried to implore you before, I think I've been sharing the whole time, haven't I, on my screen? Oh well, hopefully the people at home can hear me. I will give a screenshot so that people at home can still look at these notes. But anyway, what was I saying? So please go to Canvas. Canvas is where I have announcements, and they give you these links to the videos I'm talking about. And I will put a link up to Two American Families. And I will also put a link to our review guide if you haven't checked those out. And so so your assignment between now and next week is to watch this video on your own time, take notes on it in light of the two questions I gave you. What are the social problems in the community, and how do the families react, or what are their different experiences? And then I will also, and so your job is to watch the video, take notes. Also, look at the study guide. The review guide is for all the material we've done so far. And I want you to study that, because on Tuesday we'll have a review session, and you'll need to be able to answer some questions on your own. We'll probably review on Thursday as well, because then what I'm going to do is, because on Tuesday I'm going to have to talk about the video, and that'll take up most of the time, and then we'll want to review. But we'll review on Thursday. Then I will open up on Canvas the exam, so it'll be open from next Thursday to the following Thursday, and again it'll be on you to go home and take the exam. So if you have any questions about that, you can talk to me about, you do need to check Canvas for this material that I'll be presenting. And so, all right, have a good weekend, and look for that on Canvas. Those of you at home, I'm sorry I didn't stop to share. Let me stop to share and show you what I wrote on the board. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're just gonna run this video a little longer because of what happened there. Now you can see the board. What we're talking about here is 2 American families. And I think that what you need to know about, well, let me just quickly go over this idea of gender again, the difference between sex and gender, because that's something you'll need to know. So, so this is what I was talking about: sex versus gender. Sex, be gender. Can we see that on the board? I think you can. We said that there are 2 different but related concepts. Sex refers to male or female. Gender refers to masculinity and femininity. I don't know if I've written that clearly, but you know those words, masculinity and femininity. And we said they're very different because male and female is biological. It's determined by your body, whether you have a penis or vagina and other sexual reproductive organs or not, you know, which kind you have. Whereas gender, we say, is cultural because it's something that you can only know if you know a culture. So like if I ask, am I being masculine or feminine right now? We'd have to know which culture I'm being, am I asking that to? You know, like how I dress, how I stand, how I speak. Those things could be either considered masculine or feminine, but it would depend which culture we're talking about to decide whether it is masculine or feminine or doesn't matter. So cultures decide this. Male and female cultures don't decide that. They all have penises and vaginas, and they all can't do much about it. We said that masculinity and femininity is a continuum, meaning you can be very masculine, a little bit masculine, somewhat masculine, or neutral. You can be, you know, androgynous, both masculine and feminine. You can be a little bit feminine, a lot feminine, extremely feminine. So it's a continuum or a spectrum, whereas sex is binary. It's an either or thing. We also said that this is variable. Gender changes, whereas sex doesn't. You can get a sex change operation, but other than that, you're either male or female. But as we say with gender, it varies. It varies very much by culture, cultural variability, like comparing Native American Indian culture to contemporary American male culture in the South, or comparing Chinese culture, where men used to wear ponytails, to contemporary Chinese culture, I mean, or American culture. So cultural variability, historical variability, so even over time, the same culture can change its ideas about what is masculine or feminine. And then even within one particular place and one particular time, you see variability. You see different men displaying masculinity in different ways, different females displaying, different males displaying femininity, different females displaying masculinity. So there's a lot of variability. And all of this shows that what we consider masculine or feminine and what's acceptable or not, those are all determined by culture and society. They're constructed. Whereas we say about, you know, sex, it's kind of built in, it's hardwired by nature into us. It's fixed, it's unchanging. And I brought those up in this part of the class because it pertains to this movie, as these families change their social structure as they go from manufacturing jobs, unionized, blue-collar, middle-class jobs. That allowed things like stay-at-home moms, at least for the white family, How do their sense of themselves, their masculine and femininity change? And we can, so to observe that, we would pay attention to things like their clothes. Do those change over time? Their gestures, the way they present themselves in terms of makeup and things like that, or how they relate to people. You know, there's masculine ways of being a father or not, or a husband. So paying attention to both the men and the women in this movie and the children, girls and boys, and how their sense of masculine and femininity is affected by things happening to them in terms of, you know, their situation in life. And I've asked people to think about masculinity crisis, for example, as men go from defining themselves through their work as factory workers, making good money, taking care of their family. How do things change as they face a new situation of not working in the factory, of making less money, of sharing the money-making responsibilities with their wives, where their wives might even make more money than them? How are things affected there? So that's what I was talking about when it was closed. I'm trying to remember what else I was talking about while that share was up. We were just talking more about just American communities and how they've been affected by globalization. So if you have any questions about what I was saying while I was sharing but didn't mean to be sharing, you can email me and I'll help you understand that. But this was the main thing, I think, that was on the board. Oh, and the two questions that you're supposed to follow along for the movie. One was social problems in the community, things like their neighborhoods, their schools, their relationships, their families. How are things affected by these changing economy? And two was more about this, how comparing the families. Can you find any differences and similarities in how they respond to their changing economic situation? So that's pretty much what was on there. And all right, I will end the video now. Thanks for coming.